Question number 4 deals specifically with the properties of real numbers. And so we've got 5 properties that we're responsible for: commutative, identity, associative, inverse, and distributive. So for commutative, I think of a community. This has to do with the order of terms or the order of things that you're adding or multiplying. That's easy to get confused with the associative property, which has to do with what is in grouping symbols. This simply having grouping symbols doesn't make it the associative property, but if we change what's inside the grouping symbols, then it is. Inverse undoes something. So if I am trying to undo an operation, that's the inverse property. Distributive is if I multiply everything times something inside of a parentheses. That's usually pretty easy to recognize. And identity keeps the number the same. Keeps number the same. So knowing that makes it a little easier to think through what we have here. And so when I look at this first example, we have 5x times the quantity 4y plus 3x. And then over here we also have 5x times, but now we've switched the order of the things in the parentheses. So I'm not changing what's inside the grouping symbols, I'm changing the order of things inside the grouping symbols. So this would be commutative. For number 2, as I look at it, it's 7x plus the quantity 9x plus 8, but now I've switched where those grouping symbols were. Before they were around the last 2 terms, now they're around the first 2. That has to do with what's inside the grouping symbols, so that's an associative property. For letter C, I go from 7n plus 2 to a 7 plus 2 times n. So if I think of it working backwards, I'm distributing that n, so that's the distributive property. For letter D, I noticed that they took 2 things and multiplied them together and essentially caused them to go away because I wouldn't need to write the 1. So this was an inverse operation. Multiplying by the reciprocal undoes multiplying. And the last one here, what I noticed is everything about these look exactly the same except for this 1 right here. And that's the identity. If I take y and multiply it by 1, it's still y. And so it hasn't changed. It's maintained its identity, and it's keeping that same variable. Identity. There we go. I can spell. So when we think about these different properties, it's important to understand in general what those properties are referring to.